Hi, welcome back to Open Hand Farm. Today I am processing beets. I'm preserving them in a few different ways. So I didn't pull all of my beets, but I pulled enough that I can get these projects taken care of. So come along, let's take care of some beets. I'm doing this project on the front porch because it's going to be messy. I have 21 pounds of beets that I pulled from my garden beds, and we have cylindrical shaped red beets, and we have golden beets, but it's kind of weird. They too are more cylindrical, most of them. There are a few round ones. I'm wondering if the composted straw that I planted them was too dense for them to grow into it, because what happened is they were in the ground to about where the red is, like right here, and then the rest of them all grew up out of the ground. So it doesn't matter, they're beets, they're good, we're gonna use them. So the first way that I'm going to preserve these beets is to store them for a longer period of time. I cannot possibly use them all right now. There are ways that I could cook them and use them in the future, but for now I need to just store some of them. So I have a very cold furnace room that I am going to store them in. The best method I came up with was to use straw and bury them in the straw in a box. I have these black kind of produce boxes that has good airflow, so I thought I would use one of these. So I'm going to put some straw down. I think I will put a piece of newspaper in the bottom, so it'll be a little bit blocked, but I don't want the straw to fall through. So I'll put a layer of newspaper in, and then I will add straw and add beets on top of that with no beets touching each other. Let's see how that goes. We're going to leave the beet dirty. We're not going to wash it. We are going to cut the greens off and leave part of it on there. We don't want to cut it all the way to the tip of the beet. The roots we're going to leave intact like they are. Then we're going to put down a thin layer of straw. So it has a nice little nest. And we're going to lay it on there. Then we're going to kind of make a little wall. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a little straw wall to divide the beets. So this is a big one. I'm going to have to put it down here and snug it up. Keep on going here. All right. I'm just making sure there's enough straw to protect them so they don't touch each other. Go that way with this one. See where they are, I'm lost. And I'm keeping some of them out for another project. I still have plenty that I need to pull, let me tell you. Now remember, you don't want to wash these, you don't want to cut the roots off, and you want to leave a couple of inches of the beet greens. All right, now I'm going to put a layer of straw on top of them. And then I will take them down to my basement and put them in a cool spot. I'm working outside because of all this straw today, and I'm in the shade of the front porch because it's about 90 degrees, and in the sun it is so hot. Perfect. So I'm saving these beets out, and these are all golden beets because I want to try something that someone told me about the other day. So we're going to go inside and try something new. I have beets here that I cut the tops off of and left them just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to juice them. A friend of mine told me that I could make beet lemonade. So let's walk through this together. So the first thing we have to do is clean up the beets so that we can juice them. You'll see these are golden beets. I love juicing golden beets because they don't make the mess that the other beets do. That sound was my oven. It's ready to bake my turnips. So I'm gonna run over there real quick and throw them in the oven. I'm gonna put these back in the bowl and then I will wash them when I'm all done. Since this isn't an actual recipe, there's not a specific amount that I need. So I'm just doing what was left after I stored some. And I'm gonna do some other things with the beets. I'll go out and pick fresh ones. That one is so pretty and orange. Okay, now I'm just gonna wash these. Okay, they're all washed and ready to go, but I wanted to say that because these grew cylindrically instead of round under the ground, it has some skin on it that's kind of tough instead of just this fresh colored skin. So I'm going to pick one that's smaller and I'm going to run this through the juicer and see if it tastes okay. If it tastes a little bitter, then I'm going to peel these before I use them. All right, let's see what we think. I think it's fine. Oh, that's so good. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and juice the rest of these, and then I will show you what else we're gonna do. I put it in this half-gallon jar because I didn't know how much we would have. The next item is lemon juice. I do not have fresh lemons, so I'm going to use the usual lemon juice bought at the store. The back of this says that 3 tablespoons of this is the same as 1 lemon. So we're gonna start with that. All right. Then my friend also said we can put honey in it to sweeten it. This beet juice is pretty darn sweet, but I did add lemon juice, so I'm gonna stir it and see what I think. All right, let me just take a little in the spoon and try that. Okay, first of all, it needs more lemon, although I love it just as beet juice, but if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. We'll put another lemon's worth in. Okay, and I think with that lemon, we are gonna need some honey. But I'm afraid the honey is just going to kind of be sticky in chunks. Something that a friend showed me and bought for me is beet sugar. So I'm thinking if I'm going to put sugar in beet lemonade, why not use beet sugar? It's a 1-to-1 substitute for cane sugar. I think I'm gonna start with about 1/4 of a cup. Let's mix that in. Hopefully it'll dissolve nicely. I've never used it. If some of you have used it, let me know what you've used it for. I didn't know if I could make cookies or actually zucchini bread or something like that with it. All right, let's see what we think. Oh my, that is really good. But honestly, I still am not tasting a lot of the lemon. So we're gonna add 3 more. Now, what I need to do when I'm done here is I need to write down everything that I did to make this so that I don't have to guess the next time I make it. I'm really bad at that. Do you guys do that too? All right. I'm gonna, new spoon here. That is really good. Now, we need to work on our presentation. My daughter-in-law is downstairs resting. She is a week overdue from having this baby. And so I thought I would fix her a glass of it on ice and take it down and see what she thinks. Now we're going to do something different with part of the beets. We are going to make some dehydrated beet chips. I looked at different recipes. Some suggest cooking the beets first. Some suggest using them raw. I kind of feel like I like the idea of cooking them first. So I'm going to take my beets, cut the tail off, and kind of wash them off. And I'm going to put them on a pan, and I'm going to bake them at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes or so. They should be fork tender, so you can push a fork in, and if it's soft enough to go in, they'll be ready. I'm leaving part of the tail on, part of the greens, because it just makes it less messy to work with. And then after they're baked, I should be able to just rub the skin and the skin come off. So we'll see if that really works. I know this seems like a lot, but when you're dehydrating, you feel like you're doing a lot, and then after they dry up, they're so small, you're like, oh, is that all I got? So I'm gonna try to do all of the red ones that I have here. Okay, we got all the red beets. The orange ones are left for another project. My oven is hot, so now I'm just gonna kind of rinse some of the dirt off of these. Like I said, they don't have to be real clean because we are going to take the skins off when they're done baking. Okay, my beets are done, and I have to tell you, this is the first video I've made inside the house since my grandkids have moved in. So you might see some little kids running through here, and that's just the reality of life right now. I can't have them go outside and wait while I video. They're just gonna be a part of things around here. That's the way it is. So they're playing nicely together, and we're gonna keep that up. So here are my beets, and I was supposed to use a pound for this recipe. I just weighed these, and it's more like a pound, 10 ounces. So I'm gonna treat it as a double recipe because I figure it won't hurt to have a little extra seasoning on the chips. So the first thing we need to do is to get the skins off. So let's see how we're gonna do that. These have been baked, and I don't know if you can tell, but the skin is kind of raised on them. Like on a baked potato, you'll see the skin kind of raises. So we're just gonna peel it off, just like you would a potato. That's easy. These are red beets. I usually use the golden beets so that they don't stain my fingers, but not gonna happen today. I'm just gonna be stained. These are gonna make very tiny chips. So I might slice them long ways because these are very small. I'm just gonna keep peeling these, and then I'll come back when I'm done. So here's the last one. I have to tell you, this wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but it was okay. It would either come off really nicely like this, or I would have to kind of peel it with a knife, but it worked. Now we have all of these done, and I'm just going to slice them. I've decided that I'm going to slice these this way so that I can have a bigger chip. They're still gonna get pretty small. Oh, Genesee is showing me here. Come over here. Can you see yourself there? Genesee is showing me her painted fingernails. She doesn't want to work with this beet because that would mess up her nails. You could use a mandolin, but I didn't want to get it out for these. I'm just going to keep slicing these up, and then I'll come back and show you what we do next. I got them peeled and sliced, And now we're going to put the seasoning on them and put them on a dehydrator tray. I used all my avocado oil. My daughter-in-law is going downstairs to get me some more, so I'm gonna keep working while she goes. So we're gonna add 6 tablespoons of avocado oil because I told you this is closer to 2 pounds, so we're just going to go ahead and use the higher number. Otherwise, I don't want to double it because I don't want them that greasy. So for salt, we're going to use sea salt, and it's 2 teaspoons. So there's 1 and 2. For the garlic powder, I'm actually using garlic granules that I got from Lilac Lane, and it's 1/4 of a teaspoon. Thank you. All right, more avocado oil. So I put 2 in, now I need 4 tablespoons, that is. Okay. There we go. Now, the secret ingredient that I love so much is rosemary. I crushed some here with my mortar and pestle. I have a huge rosemary bush that I dry and use instead of doing store-bought, and this calls for 1 teaspoon. Well, guess what? I'm doing a little bit more than that because I love it. Now we're gonna mix this up. I'm gonna use a whisk and just whisk it together. And then we're gonna pour it over our beets. Try to get all that yumminess out. And then we're just gonna mix them around inside there. These are gonna be pretty oily, I'm surprised. So I have to tell you that this recipe actually calls for you to put them in the oven, but I want to put them in the dehydrator, so that's what I'm gonna do. I found another recipe that talks about how to dehydrate beets, so I'm going with that one to figure out how long and how high to cook them in the dehydrator. So now that they're covered, I'm just gonna lay them out on this sheet. You want to lay them out without being laid on top of each other. Gonna keep just laying them all out, and then I'll tell you how we're gonna dehydrate them. Okay, we have 2 trays worth. 1, let's see, and 2. It kind of looks like a jerky or something with the coloring. So I'm gonna put the lid on. And then we're going to set the timer. I'm sorry, this is really dusty. It's been downstairs and I haven't been able to use it a lot. So I brought it upstairs so that I could use it more. Okay, we're gonna put it on 125 and we're gonna do it 8 to 10 hours. And some of these are pretty thick. So I'm gonna go with the 10. We'll check them and see what we think. It'll probably be in the morning before I check them. And I have one more way that I want to use the beets that I picked out of the garden. Now, I have a bowl of beets. I will not be using all of these because I don't need them that many for this recipe. So these I will just eat raw, which I love to do, or I might put them in a salad or whatever. But I am going to use some of them. I am going to put them through this chopper that I got at a garage sale for $2. I'm gonna chop them, and when I do, that's going to cut them julienne style, a little square, and that's what I'm gonna use for this next process. I am going to ferment them, and to them, I'm going to add some rosemary to add some flavor. I have plenty of rosemary, so anytime a recipe gives me that as a choice, that's the choice I take. And I am going to use the smaller beets in this chopper. These big beets would never work in that. So this one is a red beet. It's the only red beet I have, but that's more the size of beet that works in the chopper. So I'm going to chop up some beets and we'll come back and get them fermented. Okay, now before we pack our jar, we're going to weigh the jar. So the first thing I need to do is turn on my scale, then put my jar on it, and that is going to be the weight of my jar. So I need to write that down. So it's 15.45. I'm going to fill this jar up to about 2 inches from the top. So I have a 2-inch head space is what that's called. So if you ever see a recipe that says leave a 2-inch head space, that's 2 inches above the top of the vegetables. And I know you're thinking, you're going above that right now, but it's okay because I also need to kind of pound them down in there nicely together. So I'm going to grab my pounder. I have this pounder that is wider on one side than the other. So this one can be used in narrow mouth jars very easily, and this one can be used in wide mouth jars. And I am just going to start with this one because it will go through the whole of my funnel. It's small enough for that, so that's nice. Push them all in. Then I can push these down. So when you're fermenting, you want to fit as much in your jar as you can. So I'm just pressing them down. So the next step is to fill our jar, covering our beets with filtered water. So we're going to pour it in and just let it drizzle on down between the beets. And we're going to do it until the beets are covered. Now we're going to weigh our packed jar. So that is 44.05. Okay, now's when we have to get into our math. What we need to do now is subtract the jar weight from our total weight. So the jar weight was 15.45. So if I subtract 15.45 from 44.05, I come up with 20.6 ounces. So that 20.6 ounces represents the weight of my water and beets, not the weight of the jar. So now, once again, we got to do some math. We need to multiply the weight of our beets and water, which is 20.6, by 0.025. I get 0.515. Now what this number represents is the salt concentration that will go into my brine for my fermentation. So now I need to weigh my salt, and because the number is 0.515, I'm going to round it up to 0.52. And I'm going to get it around in there. I might not get it perfect. The salt that they suggest using is pink Himalayan sea salt. And this is not the jar this came in. I have a huge jar and I just put it in this container. But as you can tell, it is pink and it has different minerals in it. So this is what I'm going to use. And to measure it, I'm going to use this little bowl. I'm going to tear it out so that I'm back to 0. And then I'm going to pour in 0.52 ounces. I'm just gonna leave it at ½ ounce. Now I'm going to add the salt to my jar of beets. And in order to mix this in, I'm just gonna put a lid on and I'm gonna shake the jar up. Don't be afraid to shake it because you want that salt to get everywhere in the jar. There we go. I put the rosemary in, and just like with the salt, I'm going to shake it up. The recipe had different options that you could flavor your beets with. I chose to just add rosemary, which was one of their options. You can kind of see the rosemary where I shook it up. It was 1 tablespoon of rosemary for the jar. Now the next thing that you want to do with this, see how the beets have floated to the top. These beets that are exposed to the air will mold. You do not want that. They need to be submerged under the salt water in order to ferment in a healthy, good way. If you see any black mold, furry mold growing, do not eat your ferment. Throw it out and start again. You might see a white substance on top of the liquid, and that is called cum yeast. And that is okay. You can still eat it. If you want to take a spoon and scrape it off, you can, but it is not going to harm your ferment, and it's not going to harm you if you eat it. So those are the two different things. If you see something black and white and furry, don't eat it. Just a nice little topping of a white substance, that's okay. If, of course, you are in doubt and don't feel comfortable in knowing which is which, feel free to start over. But I would say that if you start over, you do everything correctly and you still get the smooth white surface on top, that's just the cum yeast. What I do to hold my vegetables under the water surface is use a glass weight. This is heavy. It has a little handle here that you can hold it with, grab with tongs or whatever when you want to take it out, but it's heavy enough to hold the beets down. You could also use a Ziploc bag with water in it. You just put some water in a small Ziploc bag and lay it on top, and the water will weigh down the beets underneath the water surface. So that's another option. Now, after you weigh your beets down, you want to leave them sitting out on a countertop, preferably out of direct sunlight. What happens during that time is there will be a bubbling process that will happen, and that will be the fermenting going on. So that will go on for 7 to 14 days, and when it stops, you'll know that your ferment is done. At that point, you can cover it up with a regular lid and put it in the refrigerator. Now, while it is fermenting and bubbling, I use these fermenting lids. There are so many different kinds of fermenting lids out there. This one is very simple. It goes inside the ring of a canning jar. It has this little opening in the top so that as it's fermenting, the gases can escape. And you don't have to worry about having to turn the lid and release the pressure of the bubbles or anything like that. Now you can also just put a lid on the jar, but you want to just lay it on there and maybe give it one little turn. And the gases can come out the open edges of the jar. Now, I personally put my jars on a bowl so that if some of those gases escape, it doesn't go all over my cabinet. I've also left a towel laying under them or whatever, but you might have liquid running down the side of your jar. So I just want to warn you that that is a possibility so you can prepare for it and not worry about it. that means you've got some good fermenting going on. When you put it in the refrigerator, the fermenting process will continue, but it will be at a much slower rate. So when you put it in the fridge, it should have a little bit of a tangy taste to it, and that tangy taste might increase over time. But you can leave a fermented item in the refrigerator for a long time. I would say until you taste it and say, that is just too fermented for me, then it's done. But as long as there's no mold on it or anything like that, you can definitely keep eating it. Let's put the weight in and the lid on and get this done. Okay. I definitely have them exposed in the air. I'm going to use my pounder again and push it down in there. Now, the liquid is coming up as I do that, and that's what you'll notice in ferments is as they sit, the juices increase sometimes. All right, now I can see that I have pressed that down in there, and the water, let me see if I can show you. And the water is covering all of the beets. So now I'm going to take my weight and I'm going to drop it in there, and it might come over. No, it didn't. You can see my weight in there. And now I'm going to put my fermenting lid on. Now I can go ahead and tighten mine because I have this little air nipple that will let the fermenting gases come out. Like I said, I will sit it in a little bowl so that that just captures anything that might come over the edges, because it'll kind of spit sometimes, and that will come over and be caught up in the bowl and not all over my counter. We're gonna put this in my creamery, which is the laundry room, basically. If you haven't seen why we call that the creamery, we have videos on that. Be sure and check those out. I'm gonna sit it in there, and there's no real direct sunlight, so it should be good, and it's also kind of warm in there, so I think it'll do great. This is the counter that I'm going to place it on, and you will notice that I also have sourdough here. Now, if you're not careful, if you put your ferments too close together, they could cross-pollinate, I guess you would call it. I don't know. That's just what I have learned, not to put them right next to each other. I'm going to be building up these 2-gallon jars because I'm making waffles for my family. So we'll have about 16 people to make waffles for on Saturday. So I'm in the process of building that up. But over here is where I have put my beet ferment. So I will leave it here for 7 to 14 days. I'll let you know in one of my upcoming videos how they turned out. You guys, thanks so much for coming along on this video. It has been a big beet year. I actually have more beets that I could go ahead and pull, but I haven't yet because I wanted to try out some different ways to use them, so I would know how I wanted to use all of them. And I figured they would be safer waiting in the ground than pulling them and letting them get kind of limp in the refrigerator. So if you have beets and you try these things, let me know which one you like the best. I'm really anxious to see how well the beets store in the straw. And I wanted to show you how my beet chips turned out. This is one tray of the chips. And they're really small. They're more like a julienne type. I would definitely use a mandolin the next time I do this. And I would definitely cut down on the oil because they are kind of oily. I might have to kind of lay them on a paper towel to get some of the oil off, but they taste amazing. And of course, part of that is, again, the rosemary that I put on them from my big rosemary bush. I can never get enough of that, you guys. I love it. I just put it in jars to smell it. It's so wonderful. So we have the ferment going. We made beet chips and we stored beets in straw. In some of my upcoming videos, I will let you know how the fermented beets are, and I will let you know how the storage goes of the beets in the straw. So if you're new here, thanks so much for coming along. And my name is Penny, and I should have told you that sooner, but I didn't. And I also have to tell you, my hair doesn't always look this bad. It has been a day. I got up, went outside first thing, kept thinking, oh, I'll comb my hair later, and the day's gone, and I needed to make a video, and I had to fit it in where I could, so here I am. And that's the thing, I will be very real with you, because I know that life is not a bed of roses. There are struggles, and there are things you just have to fit in when you can. So if you're looking for somebody that is just trying to make things work the best they can, you're in the right place. So thanks again to all of you for watching. And if you know someone who is growing beets, be sure and share these videos with them. Maybe they would like some of these ideas too. So until next time, blessings on you and yours.